The sentence and the nightmare. The judge's words landed with a weight that felt heavier than the wooden gavel. In 1966, a young man stood in a New York courtroom, convicted for a robbery that would change the direction of his life. The sentence was delivered plainly, without ceremony, but its consequences would echo for decades. He was bound for Attica Correctional Facility, a place already whispered about in cellblocks and court hallways as a prison where fear lived in the walls. Transport day arrived before the reality could settle. Steel doors closed, chains clinked. The bus rumbled north through gray towns and colder air. Men stared out narrow windows or into their laps, each carrying a private calculation of what awaited them. When the gates of Attica came into view, the sense of finality sharpened. Towers loomed. Razor wire glinted. The place looked less like a building and more like a warning. From the moment he crossed the threshold, the environment announced itself. The air smelled of disinfectant and damp concrete. Noise bounced endlessly, metal on metal, boots and stone, voices layered until nothing sounded human. Overcrowding pressed bodies together in corridors and cells. Privacy vanished. Sleep came in fragments. Hunger and tension became daily companions. Attica was not simply crowded. It was divided. Racial prejudice was visible and constant, etched into who stood where, who was watched, who was punished. Guards moved with an authority that felt personal, their eyes scanning for defiance. Orders were barked. Silence was enforced. Respect was demanded but rarely given. The prison ran on anger and it ran on fear. Routine offered no comfort. Morning counts, work details, meals swallowed quickly, and long stretches of waiting filled the days. Small indignities accumulated. Letters arrived late or not at all. Medical complaints were dismissed. Showers were rushed and cold. Any attempt to speak up carried consequences. The message was clear. Survival depended on keeping your head down. Yet tension simmered beneath the surface. Stories traveled faster than official announcements. Word spread that in another prison a man had been killed by guards. The details were unclear, but the meaning was not. If it could happen there, it could happen anywhere. The news passed from cell to cell, whispered during recreation, muttered at night. Fear turned into something sharper. People began to look at the walls and see a trap. What followed was not planned. There were no speeches, no leaders mapping out a revolt. It erupted from a moment that felt ordinary until it was not. A man stepped out of the shower, naked and wet, expecting the same routine. Instead, he sensed a shift in the air. The sounds were wrong. The movement was frantic. A surge of bodies pushed through the corridor, shouting, running, colliding. Chaos spread like a fire with no clear origin. Doors were forced. Barriers formed and fell. Objects became symbols of defiance. Control dissolved. Some men were swept along by the crowd. Others resisted and were pulled into it anyway. Fear mixed with adrenaline until judgment blurred. In those moments, people did things they would later struggle to explain. Guards were caught in the tide. Some were taken hostage in confusion, pulled from workshops and corridors, surrounded by inmates who were as terrified as they were furious. There were injuries. There were screams. The balance of power that had seemed so absolute only hours earlier tilted suddenly and violently. As the initial surge settled into a tense standoff, voices rose with demands. Prisoners called for immediate negotiations. They wanted basic human conditions, fair treatment, and accountability. The list was not extravagant. It was born from years of neglect. Over the next 2 or 3 days, attempts were made to communicate with authorities. But the process felt hollow. Promises were vague. Responses were delayed. What was called negotiation felt like make-believe. Time stretched. Food grew scarce. Nerves frayed. People waited, listening for footsteps, watching the sky above the yard. The sense of being trapped returned, heavier now because hope had briefly appeared and begun to fade. The prison felt like it was holding its breath. As days passed, the atmosphere darkened. The situation became more serious, more brittle. September 13th approached with a cold clarity. Everyone sensed an ending coming, though no one could say what it would look like. Men gathered in clusters, talking in low voices, bracing themselves. At dawn, the yard was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Hostages were positioned on elevated walkways, blades held close as a desperate signal. It was not cruelty that put them there, but fear. Fear that the outside world would choose force over dialogue. Fear that lives inside the walls mattered less than order. When the assault began, it came fast and overwhelming. Gas filled the air. Gunfire echoed against stone. Visibility vanished. People ran blindly, coughing, stumbling, falling over one another. The sound was relentless, a storm that swallowed thought. In the confusion, men were hit, some by mistake, some by design. The yard became a place of panic. Witnesses would later struggle to describe what they saw. Friends dropped beside them. Others vanished in the smoke. The violence was sudden and final. For those trapped in it, time fractured into flashes of terror. Survival became instinct. In the aftermath, silence replaced the noise. Bodies lay where they fell. The scale of what had happened was impossible to grasp all at once. For the man who had arrived years earlier with a robbery sentence, the certainty was immediate. He believed he was going to die that day. He did not, but the cost followed him out of the yard and into the years that came after. Sleep brought nightmares. Closing his eyes returned him to the gas and the gunfire. He was afraid to rest, afraid of what his mind would show him. The fear lingered long after the walls faded from view. This was a defining moment of his life. Not the crime, not the sentence. The realization that life could end in an instant, that systems built to control could also destroy, settled deep inside him. In the darkness of Attica, he learned how precious life was and how easily it could be taken away. The story of what followed would reshape him further. But it began here, with a sentence, a prison, and a nightmare that would never fully release its grip.